We are so excited that the announcement finally was made, the record of decision finally was put out there, and Luke will retain its 6-decade-long mission as the Air Force's schoolhouse. Luke will be the training base for F-35 jet fighter pilots. You know, first of all, I want to say kudos to the mayors of every other West Valley city and to Supervisor Max Wilson of Maricopa County. They really mobilized their communities behind this effort, and everybody was solid and never wavered. Then the Luke Forward effort that went out statewide, we had over 21,000 people come to our Luke Forward website and sign up saying, yes, I support bringing the F-35 to Luke Air Force Base. Now imagine in Washington, D.C., they're hearing protests from other bases that they are considering. They don't know what to think about this 21,000 people signing up. Then when the EIS, the Environmental Impact Study, actual meetings came out and were held, there were 5 of them in different cities, we had over 1,400 people show up. The Department of Defense literally didn't know what to do with all the public input. You know, most places, if they had 25 people show up for the whole series, that was a big deal. And of the 1,400, you know, 98% were, yes, bring this to Luke. So Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, the Air Force, the Congress, they have gone from seeing the West Valley as an area that was allowing rampant growth to almost drive out Luke's mission to an area that is managed growth with the greatest, strongest protections in state legislation of any place in the country, and the most active and involved and engaged and committed citizens all saying, Air Force, we appreciate you, we want you here, this is where you need to stay. I'm going to start on the national defense basis first, because that always kind of gets pushed off to the end. Luke is the very best place to train Air Force pilots, and that's because of the Barry M. Goldwater Range. The Barry M. Goldwater Range most closely approximates what the Air Force pilots are going to see when they go to other countries in defense of the United States. So it's a perfect place to practice what they need to do. Very short time to get there. Okay, and very good flying weather. So Luke is able to train more pilots than any other base could in the entire United States, plus the conditions that the pilots see are exactly perfect. So for our national defense and national security, landing the F-35 and ensuring that pilots will be trained at Luke far into the future is extremely important. So that's a win for all Americans. Then in terms of looking at the state, Luke is kind of the linchpin that holds all the military installations in the state together. Luke is the primary user of the Goldwater Range, but other military institutions, the Marines at Yuma use it, Davis-Monthan, others use it also. So by keeping Luke's mission intact, it keeps the range intact, which then makes it possible for the other military installations in the state to be able to continue their missions. Then we look at the economic impact, which is absolutely huge. Luke by itself, not taking into account Fort Huachuca or Yuma or Davis-Monthan, but Luke by itself is one of the largest employers in the state of Arizona. And the economic impact is over $2 billion a year. I mean, we can only guess what would happen if a major private company decided they were going to leave. Why, my goodness, the state would go into overdrive trying to keep them here. But people don't think about the impact, the economic impact of the military. You know, this road really began way back, I would say in the 1990s. And that's when we first began to understand that the protection of the airspace was the most important thing in order to keep Luke's mission here. And that's when residential development was just beginning in those areas they fly over. So in the early 1990s, the city of Glendale took the lead with what became a full body of legislation, Arizona state legislation, that is now considered the model throughout the United States. Glendale also annexed the base so that the base could have a voice. It was not in any city, so when people tried to speak for Luke, the question was, well, what business is it of yours? So we annexed the base. We began slowly and methodically building this body of state legislation that makes sure people are aware they are buying in an area of a military airport, and that there's going to be noise, and that's the mission, and they become aware of it. This built in to state legislation the requirement that homes be protected from noise through dual pane windows and so forth. As the years went on, the legislation expanded more and more, and other cities started joining in forming their own municipal ordinances that required development to allow for the base to complete its mission. So this is a 2 decades long project. We're celebrating as if it just happened, and we just went into a sprint, but this has been a long, long, long